Hello, everybody. Welcome. It is January 19th, officially known as the most depressing day in Detroit history, as the Detroit Lions lost last night in their divisional matchup against the Washington Commanders. Brian, how are you doing?
That could be better. I've been in bed most of today. I've just been very sad.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
go ahead.
I was gonna say, woke up this morning. It is what it is. We move on. This is where we talk about it on the podcast where we can't afford therapy. So we give you suggestions to make you think less and to make you feel better. But David, I don't know if you want to talk too much about it. We've talked enough, and I've talked to enough people, but it's part of the theme of the episode, self care. So let's talk about it, Lions game a bit and how it made you feel, and how long you've been a fan.
Yeah, I mean, I actually became a fan, and I think it was the 2008 season where they went 0-16, and that was my first time kind of following a team
born
or,
in born in the darkness, huh?
yeah, molded by it. I did not see the light until I was 28 years old, and the Lions had finally won a playoff game. But I've had the argument, so I don't want to talk too much about the Lions in general, just because it's probably not the target audience of people that are listening. But I think from a high level perspective, we kind of sports and being a fan of sports and being passionate about a specific team or sport in general, it you have a lot of ups and downs, and it's kind of tough being a fan earlier on that they were so bad you had no expectations, and they get into the playoffs and it's depressing. They're getting blown out by the Saints or that call against Dallas, and I don't know, it's hard for me because I feel not only bad that they lost, but it's like I feel bad about the fact that it's affecting me so much when I have pretty much no say over the matter, I guess. But that kind of the territory with being a fan. And it's like, when they were worse, I felt like it was better. But instead, we've become the Cowboys or the 49ers that have good regular season. And I think there's a stat like the 49ers either miss the playoffs or make the NFC championship game since like 2000 or something. So I don't know how you feel about it in terms of how good they are now, like what being a fan is. Like now, tickets are more expensive. It's harder to go to a game. You have all these expectations, and when they fall short, and even this year with all the injuries that they were having, and you just thought they would always be able to overcome what was ahead of them, and the people that they had would be able to, duct tape and zip tie the defense together enough to be able to go and win the Super Bowl. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, obviously.
Yeah, I've been a fan since as long as I can remember. So I'm 36, and they've been bad as overall as a bad bad as a franchise since I was born. I mean, I grew up with Barry Sanders, Scott Mitchell, Eric Kramer before him, Herman Moore, Robert Porsche, Billy Sims was a little bit before my time. I'm trying to think of what else. Corey Schlesinger. Anyway, so I grew up with what would probably be considered the, maybe this comparison now the second best, but at the time it was like the best chances we had to make the Super Bowl were with Barry and back in the 90s. And it was like one season we'd be playing in the NFC Championship game, and then next year we're 6-10 and didn't even make the playoffs. So I'm used to it. So and then we had a lot of hope. We were 15-2, best tied for the best record in football, and I bought in. I was the optimistic fan defending my team online, everyone's friends, even when they had like stupid mistakes that they had to clean up, or like I just kept that positivity throughout, and I was like, man, I'm so glad we won. We've been so injured all season. That first round bye is going to help us out so much. And it turns out it was like way worse for us than I think if we would have got the fifth seed and had to go on the road. I don't know if we just put too much emphasis on rest and recover and didn't take everything as seriously as we should have. Again, these are things that I can't really control. It's an organizational thing, but I still like to, play quarterback commissioner. But yeah, it's sad. I had so much hope, and then I would be less upset if we came in fully prepared and they just outmuscled us and beat us. But we beat ourselves. That's what's the most frustrating part about the whole thing is like teams had to like literally rip our kneecaps off to beat us in the regular season, and none of that was evident in this game. And that was the most important game of the season, and we choked. So it's just going back to disappointment, the mantra of, oh, there's next year, maybe next year. But we said that last year and the same thing happened almost again. So this one feels a little bit harder than last year, well, if I'm being honest. So I don't know. I've spent all day talking about it. I'm kind of over it, but I just wanted to get a few words out once we start the show.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And for a lot of teams, regardless of what sport it is, the window to be able to win championships is so slim. Losing players, losing coaches, people are out to try to get some of the success, pull those people away so they can make their teams better. I don't know. As a fan like the NFL and just American sports in general, I know in Europe for soccer, I don't know how good of a British accent that was, but they have the relegation system, which basically means that if you're bottom three in the league, so say I think there's like 8 tiers of English football or soccer, and each tier has a certain amount of teams, and I think the top three or the top four tiers have a relegation and promotion system. If you finish in the bottom three in the Premier League, which is considered top tier in English football, you're relegated to the league underneath, which is called the Championship for whatever fucking reason why they named it that. So I can imagine it's harder, and you've seen and heard about like cities depressed for weeks because their team had been relegated, or the joy and the cheer that comes with your team getting promoted to the Premier League, and just organizational stuff. And you kind of, I know people that are fans of teams that they not around the area, but they live here. However, I wanted to be a fan of a team that was close enough in the area so I can go and see games. But now it's gotten so expensive, and I was even talking to a guy in the sauna yesterday, and we're talking about how expensive tickets were. And I was thinking to myself, like, what if you pay all that money to go and they lose? And not only did they lose, they lost in a manner that was just so uncharacteristic of the team that we had seen throughout the entire year. They were unprepared. People were missing assignments, making stupid mistakes. Jared Goff throwing terrible footballs, making terrible decisions. Didn't look like anything what he shown in the regular season, where he was setting career highs in passing yards, touchdowns, completion percentage, like breaking all of his own previous records. The Lions breaking all the records that they have held since the franchise has been around since the mid to early 1900s. So yeah, being a fan of a sports stuff, yeah, the existential crisis of I'm depressed about this, but I'm also depressed about how much I care about something I have no real control over.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning because I was like scrolling through YouTube. I was like, I'm not gonna sit here and doom scroll, through posts saying how much the Lions suck, how much other like organizational fans were telling us how we should act. We're acting like the Patriots when they had to win all those championships, and the Lions don't have that. I wasn't going to go down that path, and I was like, I'm sad that the Lions lost, but I also don't want to. I also know that this one sport doesn't define like my whole life. Like it's not like I dedicate my every day to football or football. but my social media imprint right now would suggest otherwise. Like, I opened up YouTube because I was going to watch maybe like a coding tutorial, do some career advancement uh, or career development stuff this weekend, and then all I saw was pitiful Jared Goff and blah blah. So I immediately had to close YouTube. So I think I'm just gonna stay off social media like across the board. Maybe not LinkedIn because that's literally just about your career, and just avoid it for a few days just to like let my brain reset. Because if I go on there and scroll, I'm just gonna get more and more depressed. So it's part of my self care that I'm gonna kind of do this week to move on. Also, been watching a ton of movies. And I did end up actually completing my homework assignment that you gave me. Do you want to tell the people what that was?
Oh, was it to watch Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell?
Yep, and I did. I watched it a couple of nights ago.
Nice.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I think because the movie came out in 2006, and I was like 17 at the time. I ended up watching. I think I rented it from like Family Video, and that franchise is still open. But no, it was a good movie. It was very wholesome. It had funny parts at times. It was kind of a little bit more on the serious side that I remember at certain parts. Obviously, it was kind of meant to be like a dramatic comedy or a dramedy or however you paraphrase that. So, but I liked it. I thought it was a very wholesome movie.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I think the to agree with you, the vibe, like the movies that have like a specific vibe, and dramedies can be kind of touchy. It's hard to do one that people are going to enjoy if it's too serious or too funny, not serious enough. Like you really walk this line, and I think they had done it so well that it is serious in certain times, but it's almost like a comfort type movie, like feel good about um, a guy just living his life and is presented with this problem that having to overcome that and kind of enlisting other people to help him figure out something that is just so off like what a normal struggle that he or anyone would have. So I think it is kind of very poetic. The willingness to ask for help, staying the course in dealing with these things, still living out your life and working towards solving a problem. So I think it comes down to it's a good lesson on be willing to ask for help even when things seem very weird, or if it's something that you're not familiar with, you don't know how to ask or how to explain exactly what's happening. But just kind of have the willingness to explain that to people, because it could be something that you currently dealing with in your daily life that it's hard to explain to people, or kind of like how you feel about certain things that are happening or whatnot. But yeah, I know we're kind of putting the lion stuff to bed, but I was thinking like it seems so similar. Like I hate reality television, and people are like, oh, the bad, like why would you give him that, or why would you give her a rose? Like why is she still around? What are you doing? And then me on my couch, why are you throwing that ball? You fucking idiot! Like it's just so similar, and I was just thinking about it now. But yeah, unfortunately I hadn't watched that Jim Jarmusch movie yet. I'll probably get to that tomorrow. I was actually showing my nephew Spirited Away today,
Ooh, that's a good
and
one.
yeah, he just turned 2, so
Oh,
he's kind of at that point where he knows characters and he likes Mickey Mouse. So if he's not really he can't really get too interested in a movie. He really doesn't have the his brain hasn't developed to the point of like knowing how good the movie is, I guess.
yeah. I mean, that's the innocence of being a kid, right? You don't really, you might not really know or know how to appreciate something like that until you're older, and your Uncle David showed you something that he thought was really cool and was a very well done movie, and then just to him, it's a cartoon movie that he's probably gonna be entertained by in a different way than you are. But
Well, that's the thing too, because I was thinking, and I went over and watched some of the Kansas City Texans game yesterday at a friend's house, and one of my friends, Rachel, had her kids over, and I was like thinking about with my nephews and that, like growing up, I really didn't have too much of an influence over, what good music is, what good movies are, how to, or really exposed to like a lot of different media outside of having to watch whatever the fuck my stepdad was bringing home from Family Video or Blockbuster, and it was mostly like blue collar comedy tour shit, like Larry the Cable Guy movies, or there's a movie called Bulletproof with Adam Sandler and I believe Marlon Wayans, and like just I and even with trying to influence them like growing up like with video games or what in school, like staying in school or in sports or what have you. So I kind of want to just make sure that not only be the fun uncle that spoils him and doesn't want like my sister complaining to me because I let him do this or oh you let him drink pop or whatnot. But also kind of being a good role model or somebody that can introduce him to what a good video game is or what to look for in movies or TV shows or music and kind of expand your horizons and find things that you really enjoy. Because growing up, I didn't really have that. I was taught the value of hard work and not being lazy and showing up and doing your schoolwork and that. But all the rest of the time, like with video games and that, I was kind of out on my own growing up. When you're younger, when you get older, it's just playing Xbox 360 and you're playing whatever your other friends are playing. And it's kind of like that now with my computer games and stuff. But yeah, I think so I don't know. You ever think about that? Like with your son too? Like as he's getting older, like how to introduce him to stuff or things that you enjoy?
yeah, my son is obsessed with YouTube. I don't know what you call it, personality. Miss
Oh
she's
yeah.
yeah, she's been on what the Drew Barrymore show. She's been on Good Morning America. She's been also morning talk shows, and she is a former music teacher. And her husband was music director of Aladdin on Broadway for a while. Um, if my
Oh
boss is
really?
listening, yeah, I don't know if it's Broadway or I think it's called the State Theater is like the second biggest one. I'm probably wrong on that one, but yeah, he was music director for a large Broadway musical for a couple of years at least. And then they had a son who had learning disabilities or gross motor delays, and they found that in their research that kids learn better with sign language and singing, specifically for their speech and kind of just like their brain development. So they started a show on YouTube or this channel on YouTube called Songs for Littles. And then she was like the main character, not main character, but she's like the host and teacher. Um, and but my son was obsessed with that. So even getting him to watch like things like Cars, like even though I think well into high school when that movie came out, and like Finding Nemo, I think I was in middle school when that one came out, but even getting him to watch those, like he's interested in them. But his like main thing that he watches is Miss Rachel, like all the time. He'll watch them for like an hour or 2 a day is all we're allowing for TV right now, but that's what he watches, and that's like his favorite thing. Like we got him books, like there's like a whole almost like episode just in book form that we had for him, and then there's like learn how to go to potty with Miss Rachel. Like it was like no, she's like starting to become like that big where she has like her own like toy line and book line and all this stuff. So, but that's what he was obsessed with. So currently, it's a little hard to kind of get him into that, but I also see myself as a 3 year old and him. He's about to turn 4 on Saturday, actually. But I see a lot of like me and him in that like I want to watch what I want to watch. I don't care about what my parents watch. And then, it wasn't until I think maybe when I was 5 or 6 that I was really started getting interested in what my parents were watching, like the Disney movies that they liked when they were growing up, and etc. So yeah, I definitely see him in that, and we're trying to get him. You know, he's got his nursery rhymes, all his numbers up to 25. He's got all that going for him. He's way ahead of me on that as as far as I can remember. So yeah, it's fun to experience that as a parent, seeing your through like life through your kids' eyes, and I think that's something like it's lost upon people, being able to have that childlike innocence and maybe empathies that kids have of not judging you based on anything other than just what you give to them or what you bring to them. So, but growing up, I would always listen to what they refer to as butt rock now, on the what the kids are calling it, like Disturbed, Godsmack, um, Corn,
Hoobastank,
yeah, Hoobastank,
Breaking
Hoobastanky,
Benjamin. Who? The
yeah,
Stank.
the stink, yeah. It was all Breaking Benjamin, yeah. All those bands that came around in the 2000s, like unapologetically, like would always compare them to like the Beatles. I'm like, nope, butt rock all the way. And obviously, I just wasn't as cultured as I am now. But it's kind of part of the funny thing about life is really until you learn, yourself and all that, and actually like experience things,
Hmm.
you're not going to have a different perspective, a different way of looking at things. So kind of this me rambling here, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, it's hard to. Yeah, I'm familiar with Miss Rachel, and yeah, I didn't know that they had a child with disabilities and that her husband was, or she was a former music. Like, I really had no idea about the whole backstory behind it. But yeah, like I think you make a good point too, with like the childlike innocence of just exploration and discovery about finding out things that they like, or will watch something that you're watching without like too much judgment. And I don't know if I don't want to feel like or like sound like my parents with, back in my day, music was on a record. We didn't have none of them newfangled iPads watching people play Roblox or playing Roblox. It's like I was a kid playing Nintendo 64 or Sega Genesis for a certain amount of time, and I had, oh man, it was so cool. I had like this tiny this tiny box TV that had a VCR attached with it. Like, you remember those?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
had
so I would
several
sit
of
there
those.
and I'd sit there and watch Space Jam like 24/7, or Barney, or actually had Kiki's Delivery Service growing up, and Studio Ghibli put all their stuff on HBO Max, and I like that is such a good comfort movie for me. Like, I love it, but the change now of like, is it really different than what we were doing as kids? Because I would sit there and I'd have my Saturday morning cartoons, or be watching Space Jam on loop. Is that any different than some kid playing Roblox or watching someone play Roblox? But I guess it kind of comes down to like how much time they're allowed to have with it. But there's lazy parents out there that just will have their kids sit on an iPad so they don't have to engage with them. Or I know the parents are busy, obviously, but I definitely feel like there's a specific demographic that will just allow their kids free reign to just sit on their iPads all day and not really engage with the rest of the world, instead of like, oh, let's go outside, or let's go to the park, or hey, let's watch this movie, or something like that. Or like, hey, let's, if you're maybe like cleaning up the house and listening to music.
Yeah. And with like my son's generation, kind of like that, like little part of it. So we had to put him because my son does have some like gross motor relays. Like he still kind of struggles with his speech, even though he's almost almost 4 years old. So we had to put him in this program called Early On. I'm sure it's different in other states or maybe other countries, but he was getting weekly speech therapy, OT, which is occupational therapy, and physical therapy. So they would give him like different exercises because my son didn't crawl when he was learning to walk. He would like butt scoot almost. And what they kind of have theorized when you miss out on crawling is you kind of like don't necessarily get that like locomotion in your brain that you would have with like a baby who did.
Right.
Um, so he'll still struggle. So I think that's why he's so drawn to Miss Rachel. But my son's generation, like or a little part of that generation, went through COVID. So there was actually more cases, at least locally here. I can't really speak to numbers nationally or anything like that, where kids just didn't get a chance to socialize because in that certain kind of maybe 1 to 2 year or 3 year um, age range where it's so important. So a lot of them are struggling just with in those areas, and so at least in my local community, it was the largest number of kids that they had in that group range going into early on. So he his group specifically just didn't get that kind of chance to socialize. But now he's in almost preschool. He's been in school for well over a year now, and he's tolerant, and some of the other kids they're kind of learning to grow and kind of speech cue or social cues and all that stuff now. But yeah, it was but for like other generations and like the lazy parents of just not interacting with their kids or making them do other things other than just being on an iPad or a video game. Um, yeah, I can't really speak to those, but you know, I get it from that if they just weren't able to, like they just didn't have the ability, like maybe they live in a countryside where there's not a lot of people, small community, that type of thing. But if it's just like laziness from parents, that's a different, completely different thing.
Yeah. I know it's hard to criticize, especially like being judgmental of people because you never really know what what they have going on or how difficult they have it, or if they're having to single parents or whatnot. But yeah, like because Lawson, my nephew's 2 years old, and he had just turned two, but he's all around. Like he wants to play with stuff, he wants to walk around the house and fool around and what have you. And I come home today, even, and my mom was babysit him, and she like passes him off to me. I'm like, what are you doing? You wanted grandkids? He's too much work. So I just
Wow.
remember. I remember growing up and my grandma watching me and me like duct taping stuff together. I took a string and like tied the front and back door together. I was like trying to set up like booby traps, and I remember like there was a can of paint that got knocked over and spilt everywhere. I cut my sister's hair after getting my first haircut. Like my mom freaked out, and they talk about that all the time. But yeah, I mean, kids are just so explorative, and parents of I think certain parents are more homebodies, or not to like. I sit on my phone a lot, and I know there's probably other parents that like sit on their phone a lot and stuff too, and will give their kids like some sort of stimulation for a certain amount of time. But being a stay-at-home parent, like you play with them, and they're just not going to run out of energy as quick as you would like to. So yeah, it's hard because they're always wanting to have something going. It's always something going on, or they play with this toy and play with that toy and making mess that you have to clean up. Or now they're hungry, cooking food and everything. But yeah, it's a lot of work. So don't mean to like criticize anybody, but I imagine there's probably some studies done on limited screen time versus engaging in play with your children.
Yeah, yeah, we try to. I don't know. I don't know if there is a study. It's just like I just don't want my son, and this isn't to sound like I'm some great parent or to criticize others. It's just I don't want my son to be like kind of like how I was and just sit in front of a TV and play video games, not want to socialize. Like growing up, it was just for me. It was like I had a few friends. I never, you know, when I was younger, I was maybe a little bit more social. But as soon as I got into like middle school, it's just like all I wanted to do was play sports, come home, play video games, go to, and do homework. I didn't really want to do that part, but then go to bed. Like that was it. That's how I kind of just turned into a homebody. So I don't want that for my son. I want him to be more active. Still have his like electronic or you know TV show obsession that he is very much into, but I just don't want him that to be kind of become his life like it became for me. I used to be really athletic as a kid and even into high school, but the older I got, the less serious I took it just because I was never really any good to like go to like pro or anything like that. So I just kind of like over time naturally lost interest in like playing sports. So
We've talked about the
yeah.
transition in like sports, and it's like once you don't have that team anymore, and you can sign up or get some people to, like we were talking about playing indoor soccer, and then we started to realize our joints don't work very well anymore, and it took a
Yeah.
lot of time to recover just because of all that dynamic movement. So yeah, I'd like to, I don't know, maybe if I get rich one day, set up some sort of program for people that are adjusting from working out or being in a team and using that to get exercise growing up and transition it into exercise that you could get still. I know with colleges they have intramural sports that people will go out for, but yeah, kind of like that team perspective. It really gets lost on you, especially like going to college, because you get group work, but you're never going to really like the people that all the people that you're doing the group work with, or somebody's not participating as much as they should be. And then you get into the workplace and it's kind of the same deal. You're never going to really like anybody. Some people aren't committing to or doing as good of a work as they're capable of or should be doing. But growing up and playing sports, it's like if you don't practice, if you don't show up, if you don't give good effort, then you're just not going to play. Whereas now it's like in school and in life and work and whatnot, there's a ton of people that just kind of get away with not contributing as much as they should. But yeah, I think I want to like transition a little bit. Kind of made it a goal of mine to go to the library finally and sign up for a library card, because I looked at Libby and there's a few other apps that do it too, but it's like digitally checking out books that I wanted to do a while ago and never got around to it. And I finally went yesterday, and man, I hadn't been to a library since I was a kid. I think we went on a like school field trip, or maybe my mom took me. But the library is like so many cars in the parking lot. You go in and they've got they're doing a donation thing for the Humane Society. They've got video games you can check out, anime DVDs, regular DVDs for movies, the books, obviously. They have a library of things. Like people can check out tools or board games, like stuff for people's hobbies. So yeah, it was really cool. So I'll probably go back in there again. Like people there to use the computer, print off pages, just there to read. I've seen a couple guys playing chess. Like they've got the children's section in there too. So like when my nephew gets a little bit older, I might bring him in there. Like once he starts wanting people to read to him.
Yeah, I haven't been. We got my son a library card like a year ago because just in between with summer, it was and him begin school. You kind of want to at least have him go kind of be with other kids. We couldn't really afford like summer camp or anything like that, but we wanted them to be around some kids, at least in that break. So we got them a library card, and there's different reading activity groups that we can take them to, or just where they have a story, or they'll have a special guest, quote unquote, like a Miss Rachel or whatever popular character is at the time to come read to kids. But before that, so this last summer, 2024. So I hadn't been since in high school. So yeah, it's been about 2 decades since I've been in the library prior to that. But yeah, you're right. It was definitely a lot different when from when I was a kid. It's like, so when I was a kid, it's like we only had the budget and our room in our library for like one or two computers. Now it's like they have like a whole like media center where you can go, like there's a computer lab and all sorts of digital archives, and but all sorts of book sections and different areas where you could potentially sign up for like a chess club, like you said. No, all very cool, and I'm glad that libraries are still a thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of great resources for people. So, um, yeah, I am a huge supporter of taxes going towards libraries and money that I give the city or whatnot. I guess they had just redone it a couple of years ago, but yeah, like going in and all the books that they have out on the shelves. And I rented Fairy Tale by Stephen King, and somebody had recommended that to me because I had finished The Will of the Many, which great book, like Roman type society with a hierarchy based around. Uh, I don't know exactly what it's based around, but basically there's a hierarchy, and they have uh, the people underneath like have to give some of their will or like life energy to the people higher up, and people higher up have the ability to do like magical things, or the will is used to power like railroads and trains and like all this other stuff. So it was a really good book, and it's kind of like dark fantasy somewhat. And somebody had recommended me to read Fairy Tale by Stephen King if I like dark fantasy. So I'll probably dig into that a little bit tonight, and yeah, we can talk about that. Um, or I'll talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, just kind of check in on goals and whatnot. Kind of been cheating on mine a little bit, but definitely noticing the less money being spent. I think the biggest thing is like when I run out of groceries and having to go back to the grocery store is being tough. It's kind of similar to I did my laundry, but now I have to fold it, or I was going to put my dish in the dishwasher, but the dishwasher's clean and I have to unload it. I don't feel like doing that right now. It's kind of similar with that. So just kind of like the breaks in what I'm trying to do, but now when I run out of food and I the loophole I found the other day was that I had a free medium pizza from Hungry Howie's in my rewards. So that was my
Ooh,
way. That was my way of getting around it. I had set a goal for myself. I had set rules and had found a loophole. So the mental gymnastics that I'm doing to get out of something that I had set my mind to and the goal that I had set has been it's been a struggle. Like inside of me, there are two wolves, and one wants to be fit and not spend as much money, and the other one is just a glutton who is very smart and very conniving and finding ways to work against me.
yeah, I get that. I have two wolves too, but they both have ADHD, so whatever
Yeah,
side is gonna just forget what it was doing anyway.
yeah. One's focused on something and then gets distracted by something else, and then that the other wolf was focused on the thing that the previous wolf had gotten distracted by, and is now just like running around in a circle.
Yeah, yeah. And then at one point, it's probably just staring. Both were staring at the ceiling for no apparent reason other than just to fade out. So yeah, I kind of get that from that standpoint. I kind of fell into that ADHD, especially with chores. I was pouring myself some milk, but then like the milk was empty. I was like, man, this is really empty. I should just put some water in it, rinse it out, and go take it out. And I'm like, well, so I left my cup, and then I crushed it, and then I noticed that the trash can was full, so I might as well take that out, so I don't have to do it in the morning. So then I did that, and then I took it out, both of them out, threw them in the respective bins, and I was like, oh yeah, I left my cup in my truck. So then I went out the back door, and then when I came back in, I came in through our front door, and I looked at the door. I'm like, man, I left the door open, so I closed that, and then I went and scrolled on my phone on the couch for an hour. I was like, man, I'm really thirsty now.
Hmm.
Forgot my cup. I
Yeah.
just
You know,
it was fun.
doorways are associated with memory loss. Like there is a correlation between like going through a door and forgetting something. Like there is somewhat of a scientific connection. I'll have to look into it. I imagine it has to do something with like survival instincts to like being in a new space. So like you're trying to make sure that it's safe, like visually, and then in doing that kind of unconsciously you forget what you were doing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I get that kind of on like on a. Did I remember to like lock the door thing? And then I go down, and then it is locked. But then I'm like, is it really locked though? So then you unlock and lock it again. It's like the clicking the tongs. Yep, they work.
Yeah.
It's like that nervous routine that I have.
Yeah. So yeah, let's touch on underrated piece of media this week. I'd recommend people to watch it if they are a fan of Carl Urban, fan of Alex Garland, or if they like kind of like post futuristic society societal breakdown sci-fi type stuff. But the movie is Dread, based on Judge Dredd, which I don't know, was it a I know it was a movie back in the day based on like a comic book or something.
Yeah, it was based on Dark Horse as a publisher, Dark Horse comic, where it was Judge Dredd, and then they turned it into the '90s movie with Stallone that had the same kind of cookie cutter formula as every other single action movie that he had done up to that point.
Yeah, what other characters are like? Because you said it was Dark Horse. Like, what else? They have other stuff too, right?
Yeah, they for up until they have like Hellboy. That's like the big one
Oh yeah,
that was really popular in the '80s and '90s, early 2000s, and it kind of became a terrible movie franchise. Dark Horse also had Star Wars licensing for. I think Marvel had it first up until the '80s, and then it reverted over to excuse me to Dark Horse in like the late '80s, early '90s, and they had it until Marvel. I'm sorry, Disney bought Lucasfilm in was it 2013? So over 25 years, and they did a lot of what you would call extended universe now, but they did like their own kind of original characters. Um, they focused a lot on like Luke Skywalker and that whole band after the Rebels had won. And it was like they're using like Disney is using some either characters or stories from that now. But yeah, they had like then they'd also do like History of the Jedi. They do like the High Republic. So they made up a lot of their own stories, but those are kind of like the major, I'd say, top titles that people would know about that Dark Horse has. They do a lot of video game and TV show comics. Like I know they did like a Mass Effect comic. I think they're doing currently. They did Dragon Age. They've done Halo. I think they did a comic for.
oh nice,
So yeah, they do a lot of good licensing.
gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to look more into it. So when he had said that, I like remembered, and Hellboy was the reason why I went down a rabbit hole before, so I knew it was a comic book, and I didn't know who had created it because outside of like DC and Marvel, like these comic books, it's hard to really know like what production company or author or whatnot. But anyways, our ADHD had taken over, so let's get back to Dread. Uh, it's like it starts out so they have judges, and these judges are basically policemen, but they don't have very many of them to govern over this city, this massive city that has essentially these skyscrapers that become like their own cities, and the judges are basically like very hardened criminals, very hard crimes. They go and arrest them essentially, or kill them, or what have you. And Carl Urban plays Judge Dredd and has a trainee with him, a young woman who is a telepath. Would you consider her a telepath, Brian?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. She could like basically read almost people's emotions, I think. Yeah, that's a good way.
Okay. So, and then they, whatever, the, not protagonist, what's the other one?
Antagonist.
Yeah, antagonist is Cersei Lannister, as most people would know her, but Lena Headey, who is running some sort of drug ring out of one of these skyscraper cities, and they are tasked with going in and um, arresting her or killing her. I can't remember if they actually arrested anyone in the movie or like what the process was with it. But they basically get stuck in the tower because she had control over everybody there. She was the head of the tower, and they had all the controls and everything. So kind of get like becomes almost like an escape movie, but also like track down and the war that happens between the antagonist character named Mama and Judge Dredd and his trainee. So very good film. If you like action films, like I'd said, kind of the allure seems very idiocracy isk almost, with like all the trash in the streets and the color gradients and everything. But there's scenes that are very hyper stylized in them trying to display this slow mo drug that in Mama had been distributing. So, like showing people that are on it and kind of like how vibrant everything is and how things work in slow motion. I know one of the scenes is that they give uh, some person that drug and then throw him from the top of the tower. So he feels like it's taking a long time to finally be able to hit the bottom.
Yeah, and it is an interesting role, at least for my perspective. Of it was an interesting role for Carl Urban because in really in the comics and like anything that wasn't related to the Stallone movie, like Judge Dredd's like a kind of I don't know, Boba Fett character, at least the Boba Fett from the original trilogy, where he was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like mysterious and didn't really talk much. They really nailed that part of it in this movie, and so did Carl Urban. Because like I'm used to like over the top Carl Urban. Like I remember growing up with him in the '90s when he was like he would do certain guest spots on Xena Warrior Princess, and then like he did obviously like the Lord of the Rings, and um, what other movie was he in? He was one of the assassins in one of the Bourne movies. So like I'm kind of and obviously Billy Butcher and the Boys.
Right.
So like he obviously he had some lines, but it was kind of just like him making his presence felt with like, and especially with like his eyes covered, so you couldn't really tell his facial expressions much, but he just kind of had like a quiet force behind him as a character, and he wasn't even necessarily the main character. Maybe they kind of, I think now looking at it, they did that on purpose, that the recruit did most of the talking. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of just this quiet badass, like you used to see in like some of the old samurai movies. But he nailed it. Like, and the movie also had Wood Harris, who is Julius Campbell. Remember the Titans?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just like connecting actors from other movies. It's a fun exercise that I have that really serves no purpose other than to entertain me.
The cast, ensemble, and directors, writers, and we had talked about before, but the original director of the film, they wouldn't allow him to edit it. And Alex Garland, who had written the film, was in charge of editing it. And Carl Urban at the end said that should be considered like Garland's his directorial debut. But yeah, I mean, there's like you can go down the rabbit hole with anything. You know, my mom was watching Steel Magnolias, and I don't know if you're familiar with the film. It's like earlier Julia Roberts. I think it came out in like '89 or 1990. Sally Field, Dolly Parton, a few other characters, but you know, like looking into it, and it was a true story of a woman that had blood sugar issues, and could have been like the '70s or something. And thinking about it, like back then, they didn't have finger pricks to test your blood sugar, and they had insulin, obviously, but being able to manage your blood sugar back then must have been like hell to be able to do it. So it was one of like her brother who wrote it. It became a Broadway play, I believe, in 1985, and then became a movie 4 years later. But it's like even like the stories behind these movies sometimes too can be very interesting.
Yeah, Apocalypse Now has a really interesting backstory behind like the making of it. I don't know if you want me to go into it or if you know about it.
And it's kind of up to you as much as you want to,
Okay, yeah.
however you want to explain it.
It's I don't know. They kind of made a spoof movie about it with Tropic Thunder. Literally everything about that movie was the backstory for Apocalypse Now. So Apocalypse Now was based on a book called Heart of Darkness, which I'm forgetting all the characters' names, but uh Kurtz. Oh yeah, he was looking. The main character had to go into the jungle of jungles of Africa to find this. I can't remember if it was for the East India Company or not, but something of that nature as a trading company, and he had to go and find the local rep who was Kurtz. Well, they turned it into kind of like a Vietnam esque war movie where Robert Duvall, I forget his character's name, has to go kind of into the heart of Vietnam, or I'm sorry, the heart of Cambodia to find a kind of a renegade colonel who was played by Marlon Brando. Anyway, they started filming this movie, and kind of all hell breaks loose on the set. Like there's just a myriad of things that happen. Like they had to film in between storm season, and it just so happens that like they were in the middle of it, so they had to shut down production for I think up to like 150 days, 5 or 6 months, and then by the time they come back, their whole set was destroyed. So they had to like rebuild these sets so that the movie went over budget, and then Marlon Brando wasn't really fully committed to the role. And then when they had the delays, he had gained, I think, like 50 or 60 pounds from the time that he signed on to the time that he was supposed to go filming. So they had to film all of his scenes at night because he was so large. And they would only film like chest up on even most things. And then there's a couple other things that happen, but it's I think it's the main subject of a documentary as well as obviously a spoof with Tropic Thunder. So, but yeah, one of the biggest production almost failures in movie history.
Yeah, I was just looking up. Yeah, that's awesome. A similar thing with Waterworld. I forget how we got onto it, but it was considered one of the biggest flops in Hollywood. It's kind of hard to like really dig into like what is the biggest flop, because then you add in like DVD sales and everything, and I think it ended up like making money or breaking even or whatnot. But they also had a set that got destroyed, and they tried to film on the ocean and figured out it was a lot harder than they thought it was going to be. So production, just ballooned. And even with so the new season of Severance, first episode's out. I watched that, but they're another show that has their production budget is pretty expensive, just from like set designs and like writer strike, COVID shutdowns. So there's a lot that goes into how much a movie is actually going to cost too. I know with Pirates of the Caribbean 4, I think was it might still be, but at one time was the most expensive movie ever made because they were filming everything with like new IMAX cameras or like 3D like cameras or something.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that. That was that World's End, right? That was the third one.
Yeah, there was At World's End, and then the fourth one, I think, with like Penelope Cruz, if I'm thinking correctly.
Yeah, and what's his name from John Wick? Ian McShane
Yeah,
was Blackbeard. Yeah, yeah, those were. I mean, I still both enjoyed those movies and Apocalypse Now, but yeah,
Tropic Thunder is just timeless. Like,
yeah. People try to get it canceled all the time, and maybe rightfully so. But I don't know. I love that movie so much. It's one of those movies that I could watch and laugh every time, and
yeah,
laugh at something different every time.
yeah, for a lot of reasons, just like the cast, everything is great. And Ben Stiller is the director for Severance. I know. I don't know how much more he might be like director, producer, writer, creator. Like I don't know all the credit to give him, but yeah, he is involved with that too, and it's been one of the better drama series that I've seen come out. So I don't know if you've ever seen it or anyone else listening to this hasn't, but I highly recommend that as well. Not exactly an underrated piece of media, but um, just want to get the
Yeah,
word out.
yeah, yeah. I've heard really good things. It's actually funny that after the Lions lost, my friend he's like, "Yeah, I'm done with football for now." Have you ever watched this show called Severance? That was actually earlier today, so it's the second time that I've heard about that show. So I feel like I should watch it or at least give it a chance.
Yeah, I think you'd really enjoy it. I think anyone would really enjoy it. But yeah, it's a great show. Adam Scott, John Turturro, woman actress in there. I always forget her name, but she was also in Man Seeking Woman, Jay Baruchel, and Eric Andre. If you haven't seen that either, it's a pretty good comedy series. But I know we went a little bit over here. Let's probably wrap things up. Anything else on your end there, Brian?
No, this was fun. I'll have an underrated piece of media for next week that I really want to discuss. So, but yeah, I don't have anything else. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, I still gotta watch that movie you assigned me to. Sorry, I was never a good student, never turned in homework assignments on time, so I will get to that. And I don't know if you like synth pop type music or just like alternate pop, but Magdalena Bay released an album a few months ago, and it's very good. It's not exactly a homework assignment, I guess, but if you like that sort of music and kind of in the same vein of like underrated musical artists, you should definitely check them out.
Yeah, well, I like anything kind of pop, anything that really, you know, has good rhythm to it. I'll listen to it. So
Yeah, the
I'll
music
give them a shot.
videos are pretty crazy too. I'll send you a couple of them, but yeah, everyone, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed listening to us ramble on about stuff. Hope you're doing well and working towards getting happier and healthier.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot to check in for my updates. I don't really have any updates on my business. Still kind of working on some stuff, wrapping things up that I've already been paid for, but still on track for my sales goals currently. As far as weight loss is concerned, I'm down 5 pounds since the time I weighed in,
Hell yeah.
just by switching up things a little bit. I don't necessarily read those, eat this instead of that book, but that's kind of what I'm doing for now. Baby steps. But yeah, other than that, I don't have any updates. And so thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.